So, good evening, everybody.
Hello and good evening.
So, audio seems to be up and running. That's great. And as I see, more or less everyone is here. So, welcome to this evening's or afternoon's webinar. My name is Mark Kuhn. With me today, Jan Hübel. We are from Universal, and would like to welcome you to this insight webinar regarding real-time compositing. So how to arrange media and what tips and tricks we can hand you on your way when using Vertex. So let me just check. Oh, there we are. So first things first, we have two formats of webinars. What we're doing today is the Insight webinar, which is really focused on technical issues. So we have the Insight webinar for operators and generally users. These webinars, as today's, are recorded. So if you go to iversal.com/webinar, you'll find the upcoming webinars as well as the previous ones, where you can download the webinar, always in German and in English. And if, for example, we use a sample project, as we will today, you can also find the sample project in the in the video comments as well. So just for that to keep in mind. The other webinars we offer once a month are the solution talks, where we talk about specific solution guides. For example, we did fixed installation this month, what you can do with Vertex and fixed installations. So those are more for planners or people who just want a general overview of Vertex. And last but not least, we have a Meet Vertex webinar, which is always a very short introduction to the software. So as said, today we'll be doing a insight. And nonetheless, we would like to do a short introduction into Vertex for people who are quite new to this. What have we done? When we founded Universal, we aspired to create an AV production suite, which for us is a software which combines three main fields in which see everyday operations happen, which is media playback, interaction, and control. And we aspire to put everything into one solution, to have everything in one place. And the result of that is Vertex. To have a fast overview of something, we'll be diving in quite deep. Sorry, forgot about something. If we're asked what's important to remember about Vertex, people always ask us the three most important things. Vertex is a multi-system, multi-display, multi-user solution. So you can combine as many computers as you want, with as many outputs as you want, and work with it with as many people as you want. That's the core philosophy behind Vertex.
And we could add also multi-device, so there's many devices we can control, but that's one step further.
So we're going to dive into a short overview of what our AV production suite does, especially when it comes to media playback, because that is quite relevant for the further course of the webinar in regards to compositing. If at any point you have questions in Zoom here, you can find a little Q&A tool. Don't hesitate to simply drop in a question. We will either answer it in text form or we will answer it directly in the course of the webinar. So if you ever have any questions whatsoever, simply use the Q&A function and hit us with any question you may have, and we'll be happy to answer. In that case, media playback, one of the core philosophies or one of the core tasks, so to speak, a media system has. In Vertex, we aspire to have a very, very wide video format support, but in reality, we can always say there are a few major video codec formats we'll be working with, which is HAP, ProRes, Notch, LC, for example. We won't go into too much detail, but suffice to say, when we're working with compositing, alpha channel is always a very, very big issue. And you can play back HAP alpha in Vertex. You can play back ProRes 444 with alpha channel in Vertex. And you can also play back, for example, image sequences with alpha channel, which can be quite useful. Also, we take care of audio playback with routing, audio effects. What is also quite important to mention are special formats. So when it comes to compositing, especially, it's not only about images and videos. We can also add web pages, generative content, or even PowerPoint. Also, quite an important thing is content management, where, yeah, we have an integrated versioning as well as system cleanups. And last but not least, what we'll be focusing on today, compositing, arranging everything in real time, be it live in a preview, mapping things onto different outputs, or integrating different video inputs such as input cards or streams, or simply audio inputs as well. That is the basics of media playback. What we won't be going into detail today is show control. As Jan mentioned, multi-device. Vertex is not only made for playing back videos, it's also made for integrating different systems, for example, controlling projectors, switchers, sensors, controlling lights, doing multiple things when it comes to network control, or writing scripts in different programming languages. That's going to be the content of another webinar for sure, but just to keep in mind. And last but not least, end user control. So creating user interfaces where a user can actually work with Vertex and, for example, press buttons and things. We'll look at some of that today when it comes to compositing. So also how to control these things. So I would say that's pretty much what we were going to show you when it comes to slides. And now I would say, let's dive into a project. Should I open our sample project, Jan?
Yes, go ahead.
Then.
Yeah, one thing that I could mention, since I started off with the devices, in Vertex compositions or timelines or sequences and playbacks, we can mix both media content and device control. So it's whenever you work with the sequence, you're not only limited to the content itself. There's always the aspect of scripting that comes into play to automate the show flow, or to control third-party devices, or being controlled by third-party devices. We won't focus too much on that today. We'll show one or two examples, but we'll basically start off with the main topic and how to do basic composition and how the rendering works. And I'd like to start off with a very, very simple example. So here we have Vertex open, and pretty much as you find when you open it for the first time. I think Martin has loaded some content here, but I'll load some from the disk. So you can either open it from the, sorry, I went too fast. So you can either right click on content, or you could click on file, import file, image sequences, or import directories. This is possible to import an entire structure of content into your show if you need to. You can also automatically create collections, which are kind of favorites or albums of your content. This can also be imported here just by using the import directory function. And there's the internal content here. So these are the ways how you can get content into the system, or a very simple way, if you just navigate in the Windows File Explorer, just go to my test content folder here. I can simply drag and drop, for example, a clip straight onto the timeline. This will generate new content. It doesn't. Let's see. Are you running in admin mode, Martin?
I don't know.
Possibly. So this might not work if you're running in admin mode, because the Windows File Explorer is not in admin mode. Let's see if it does it here. So for some reason, maybe I drag and drop it in the wrong place. So you can drag and drop it directly from the Explorer into the content section, and normally also directly into the renderer or into the Here it works. Okay, so you can drag and drop it directly into the renderer. It should work on the sequence as well. So this is how you can get your content directly into Vertex, or you manage it and organize it in groups or collections. That's what you could do here. So you can create your favorite groups here, or organize by type, or even by targets, so where content should go on which machines. So this is completely up to you. So you can create an entire folder structure here of how you manage your content inside of Vertex. And these collections can again be used for finding things, or even to be used as targets when it comes to transferring files from one machine to many others. So this is what the collections can be used for. Yeah, and basically, every clip container that we see here is a render element. And the render element is just a 2D plane in a 3D composition space. So this crocodile picture has its XYZ positioning. And if we look at the transform properties, basically the first thing you see are the 2D parameters, but you can always open up any of these properties and also deal with the 3D parameters as well. And there's also the ability to load in 3D geometry and load this onto the content as well. And this would be then located under the video section. And you would find it under geometry in, I think this is in advanced mode, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's where you find the geometry slot. So that way where you could put a 3ds file, an FBX file, and load it into here and use the main content as texture. But just to cover the basic parameters that you can apply to content, every clip container comes with basic color correction, hue, saturation, and brightness, and contrast adjustments, as well as the RGB balance. And similar to Photoshop or other packages, you can do a levels correction or a simple crop. So if that's needed, every clip container comes with that by default. So you don't have to apply additional effects. This is on board with every clip that you apply here. So you just find them here. Or if you're looking for a property, you can always in the top field here just type in a value like, I don't know, transform or position and so on and so forth. And then the inspector will be filtered to just display the properties that it found for you. Yeah, then since the one important thing about the rendering is, since we're talking about these render elements, the clip containers are each one render element in the renderer. Vertex is not layer based. So the track that we see here is just for the Z ordering and for the organization of content. And on the same track, we can have multiple clips that can even crossfade into each other. For example, here we have this auto crossfade turned on, so that we can blend from one file into another. So that's why there's no real limitation in terms of how many elements you can use. But for performance reasons, it might make sense to always have an eye on that. One section is down here to see the local systems performance, or if you want to see what your system is actually rendering, actually doing, you can always go to the system, select the system that you're interested in the Project Explorer, go to info, and here you see the current performance status of the system. And you can even see the amount of render elements and textures that are currently being rendered. So we had clients that due to various setups and preload settings, they ended up having hundreds of contents being loaded simultaneously, and they were overloading their system. And for me, when I look at these situations, I would always first check here, what's my full screen element count and texture count, so that I know what the render engine is currently doing. So, and then it might come from one of the playbacks or one of the clip containers. Yeah.
So to dive into some of the depth of compositing, as Jan already mentioned, what's quite important is to understand how Vertex is not video layer based as other systems are. So in many systems, you have a system which has a name and maybe has 4 video layers or 10 video layers. And then you see these layers, you program on these layers. Vertex is completely different. Vertex is a lot closer to something like After Effects or Adobe Premiere. So everything you see here are tracks, and any clip container you put onto a track is currently rendered in a canvas. And a canvas is per definition an open 3-dimensional compositing space. In this space, you can arrange any kind of media you like. You can, as Jan showed, you can arrange it in depth, work with 3D models as you like. But where it gets absolutely interesting is that any part of this canvas, of this unlimited content space, can then be, let's say, assigned to a physical output of any system in your network. So when you're programming a show, you program your show in your canvas. You don't have to worry about what systems you're going to be using, if you're going to be using one machine with one 4K output, or if you're going to be using 4 machines with HD outputs. It doesn't matter. What we have developed in Vertex is a canvas display surface output model And that is something Jan would like to show you now, how that works, what the basic core philosophy is, because it's absolutely essential to compositing in Vertex.
Yeah, so in Vertex, there are multiple render passes. In fact, there are currently 3 that are actually being used. There's a 4th one in the works, but I'll explain the first 3 ones first. What you're typically working with is 2 passes, which is the canvas space, like the content space. That's where you arrange your content in a 3D canvas. And canvases can be organized for, to organize several rooms or several stages. So if you have a multi-room installation in a museum, you can use it one canvas for one group of displays that create one image together, and another canvas for another group of displays. Or it's up to you how you define it. I've recently looked at a project that had over 20 different canvases because they had so many different projectors and displays used for different parts of their room, and it was just for the users useful to organize it in that way, since each part was a separate wall and they were programming different parts of it. So just think of it, the canvas is the space where you organize outputs that create one image that belongs together. And what we see here at the moment, and what I earlier enlarged a little bit, are the boundaries of the canvas. And this white line that we see here. When you go to the Product Explorer, you can go to Canvas, and the canvas has a size. And the size is only a reference frame where you want to work in. It has nothing to do with the outputs. It doesn't even limit you. It's just that, okay, if you're doing a large soft edge blended wall, for example, and the physical dimensions, and you also need the pixel, the pixel aspect ratio of that wall, then you can use that number here just as a point of reference for your programming. But you can at any time make it larger or smaller. The only place where the canvas size is important is when you work together with a third-party tool like Vioso. The Vioso is an automated camera calibration system for projectors, and they also have their internal canvases where the projectors create one image, and here there's a one-to-one relationship, but that's beyond the scope of this webinar. But in general, when it comes to composition, your canvas should fit basically your screen sizes, or your entire screen size. And what we see here in the center, since this system, or this project has currently one system, and the system has one output, and the output has one surface. So this is also what it says over here: system 1, output 1, surface 1. So some of you may ask, okay, why do I have this deep, complex structure? Again, Vertex is a multi-system framework, so we could have multiple systems, and it could be on a different output of a system, and every output can have multiple surfaces. And the reason why every output can have multiple surfaces, because it has become very popular to use splitters like triple head to goes or data path FX4s, where you would split your output into 4 segments. And each of these segments, you want to warp and blend them individually, and you want to position or define a zone or area of your canvas individually. That means, so for example, if I just pick this portion, so I can define which part of my canvas this particular output and its surface that it's applied to it should display. The easiest way to demonstrate this is also to open up a secondary render editor. And on this one, I'll just move to system and show me output 1. And when I move this one over here, so you see, okay, I can scan over my canvas and it will update the system's output. So you hopefully get the idea, because the surface where this view is rendered on, that's the place where you would do your warping and blending. Again, this is beyond the scope of this webinar, but it's important to understand that there are multiple render passes. The first stage that you will be working with is the canvas pass, and the second one is the output. There is the possibility to put content in the output pass directly, and this is defined by the so-called clip target. If you look at a clip container here, it says what its main content is, and if you would have a mask or other things, it would give you more information here. But on the right-hand side, you will always see this flag that says Canvas 1, and this is the clip target. The clip target can be found in the inspector as well. Let me see, clip target somewhere down here, down there. So this is Canvas 1. It can be a different canvas. You can even script that and change that if you wanted to. And it could also be a systems output. And when you change the clip target to be a systems output, then whatever you render will be rendered on top of your surface on the output, straight on top of it, like an overlay. So if you need to do some extra messaging on top of your output or extra masking, that's where this can become useful. And then you do some composition in the output space. And initially I mentioned third spaces, so three passes. There's initial pass that I haven't mentioned yet, and we'll dive into it a little bit later. Vertex supports the feature of nesting sequences into each other. So I can use one sequence and nest it into another, so that it becomes like a pre-rendered sequence, like you note from After Effects when you put one composition into another. And the same method works here. And this is the pre-pass. This is where, the first stage then happens. Then you're dealing with three passes. So the first pass is all the nesting, the second is the canvas, and the third is the outputs. So I hope you get the idea what that means. Unless I should do a drawing. I've prepared a little whiteboard. I could do some drawing. So I'm pretty open to that. If you have any questions, just use the Q&A and let us know. So if anything is unclear on that end.
Okay, so in that case, let's have a look at a few basics when it comes to compositing. As you saw, everything is arranged in this three-dimensional space, but we also have, if I, for example, put something below here, I also have some kind of a reference, what is in front and what is behind. So in Vertex, we have two levels of putting things on top of each other. Number one is the physical Z position, so the physical position, which we find in our, let me just close this, get some more space, which we find in here, which we already looked at. So moving something in the Z order brings it forward, backward. But if you're working in a 2D mode or in a 2D workflow, and if we're honest, 90% of the projects are going to be very 2D heavy, you can simply put things on top of each other in here. And here it works like Photoshop. On the top is the top, on the bottom is the bottom. So all of these layers are taken into consideration. Now, what is very important, maybe you've worked with other systems where if you've had 20 layers and you put the same image on the first and on the last layer and overlaid them, they weren't exactly at the same position because each video layer, so to say, had a certain depth. So if you put something at the back, something in the front, they didn't match anymore. Vertex is different. If you're working in our track structure, everything is at zero, so to speak. So everything will be absolutely in the same position, and you can simply go ahead and arrange things and composite things in the timeline without taking into consideration that you have to adjust scales or everything. Everything's going to be pixel accurate. And
there's one thing to keep in mind about that topic, and some of you may know the phenomenon called Z-fighting, since two things can never share the exact same location in space, in physical space, nor in virtual content space. So, but the way how this is solved is that we have a viewpoint that looks at the content. We have the viewpoint for each surface, and we have a viewpoint for the canvas that we're looking at here. And this always has a near and far value. And this, you probably never have to touch it unless you do some 3D composition. That's why I'm just mentioning it, so it's there. So if you look at a surface and we look at an output like that, so the viewpoint itself has both near and far, and these settings are by default set from 0 to 10,000. This has been a good default for this 2D workflow. If you right click on a canvas, sorry, I think it's in canvas space, you can switch to canvas 3D mode, and then it will change these to a different default. This will then probably cause Z fighting, and and it goes, right now it goes to +1, and this is less accurate but more accurate for 3D objects. So this is important when you do when you move complex 3D scenes. For example, you move one object inside of another object that has multiple depth layers, but that's a different topic. Just that you know, the near and far settings are meant for that.
Okay. So what is compositing about? Normally, it's about putting things on top of each other and deciding how they should influence each other and what I want to see and what I don't want to see. We'll go through a few things. We'll look at things like masking right now, about video effects, which you already touched, and simple animations. After that, Jan would show you a creative workflow of using blend modes, and I would show you a more or less standard workflow on how things can be solved, for example, in a studio setting, to be very efficient when programming a show. So as you can see here, we have our crocodile, and I just imported two textures. One is a mask with an alpha channel, just a bit of white and alpha, and one is black and white. And if I click on the crocodile here, go to video, you can see I have a category called mask. And now I can, for example, drag and drop a image into there and have a mask. And I could also add videos for this, for example. If I want to have a black and white video, to have some kind of an alpha wipe for something, to a matte wipe for something to be displayed. You have a masking channel for every single render element. So you could even go ahead, put this one below it, and drag a different mask onto that content. So you can really stack these things on top of each other using masks, which can be black and white, but there's different options as well of what you can use. If we are working with such a clip container, I can, of course, go ahead, position it where I want to. I could do that in the render editor, could do it here. But for example, if I want to have an animation that this clip container moves from one side to the other, let's say, that can be done quite simply. So I'm just going to reset a few values, drag this over here. And now I can go to the X position, do a right click and say, add a keyframe. Then I'll move forward in time, grab it, move it over there. And now you can see we have an animation which has been built. So when I jump into this object here, press play, it's going to be playing over there extremely slowly. The cool thing is you can double click on a clip container and this will open our keyframe editor, which you can see here. I'm using the middle mouse wheel to zoom in. And here you can see the keyframes I've just created. So I can now grab this for position X and move it forward, for example. So now I have it moving, not a lot faster. Let's move it even more. There we go. I could also now, for example, use my inspector to give it an exact value like 500. Or if I zoom in a little bit more, and I'll use the timeline to make it a bit larger, I could do a right click on this item and call it or change it into a Bezier keyframe, which I can now even adjust the curves of this keyframe in line inside of the clip container. So this really is where you can program animations for whichever property you like. We've done it for one now, but you can see here we have a filtering. So I can see I've only used X position. If I go ahead and I set a keyframe for the Y position, I can now either switch a filtering here into seeing every possible keyframe, or click on the filter again. I'm missing the click. There we go.
Yeah.
Only see the Y position. Yeah, only see one position, which I can now here, work with different keyframe tracks, so to speak, to create animations.
Quick tip from my side: if you're working with the keyframe editor and you're in non-filtered mode and you want to toggle through the positions, just hit the P key on the keyboard, or S for scale, R for rotate, V for volume, O for opacity, and that's how you can really get quickly to the most important properties that you might want to animate. But all the other properties that can be found in the inspector can be animated as well, and there's lots of them. So as you can see,
pretty much everything.
Yeah, so it's beyond the scope to show all of them, but I guess you get the idea. The important thing is that you know where to find things and how they work, and that you can see that where things are available.
Maybe should we do a little something on the video effects, which we brushed on slightly before?
You mean so should we do well,
I'm just doing something very.
That I wanted to mention one more thing regarding the relationship between clips and clip containers. I think that's an important thing to know, and then also showing in that part the shared texture rendering, since we haven't touched that yet. So one thing to keep in mind whenever you create a clip container is the container that is located in time on a sequence. And the clip container also creates a clip. The clip holds the information about the content that it's holding and all the parameters and keyframes. And there is a feature called create clip container instance. And then it creates a new, basically a copy of it, but it's not a true copy because these two clips now share the same clip, so share the same resource. And I can show you that. Down here, there's our clip manager, and the clip manager shows already all the clips that we've been creating. The latest one are the ones down here that we just created. And these two clips, clip container number 1 and clip container number 5, reference the same clip, which means that if I change anything in the animation here, it will be reflected in the other clip as well. So if I change this, you can see the keyframe is moving also on the other one, since it is the same clip that I'm operating on. So this is a true instance, or it's not really a clone, it's an instance. So they're using the same source. So that is one thing that is important. And of course, you can create by copy and paste. You can create a full copy, and there's a new clip that has been created from the original, and this one is will not update if you do any changes here. So this is now safe to use and to do whatever you like with this one. So, but the instancing can be useful if you need to create a certain animation and you want to reuse it in many places.
For example, a very common use we see, for instance, is if people have a show where they have an introduction for each speaker, for example, then you can use an instance, which you can position your little animation, color grade, or whatever you want to do. And if you change it for one speaker, you normally want to change it for all the speakers. So for that, you can use the instancing that if you adjust one animation, it will be done for your whole show, and just saves you a lot of time.
There's another concept called templates. We'll come to that later. It's similar to instancing, but it will basically do a few more tricks and keep the content separate. But that's a topic for a little bit later. I quickly wanted to cover the topic regarding the shared textures. For example, if you have a large surface and you want to render the same video, the same texture in many places, different aspect ratios, and you want to reuse the texture and not tell the system to render that texture over and over again, or to reread it from the disk if it's a video, then you can right click on it and create a shared texture content. Then a new piece of content is being created. I create a new clip container down here, and while its source clip container is rendering, the other clip container down here, I'll move it a little bit up, will show the exact same surface, regardless of the position, size, rotation, whatever you do with it. All the other parameters are separate, even hue, saturation, all these parameters are separate. It's just the same texture that is being used here. So this texture is being reused because it's just rendered once from the original clip container number 4. Okay. One more thing that I think I could show in here, since we lately added some blend modes. There have been blend modes in Vertex before. These were the standard DirectX blend modes, which are a little bit cumbersome to set up. You see, they are now called blend operation. I'll just use the filter here. So we have now two sections. So there's these blend operations. These are the old school DirectX or Microsoft DirectX modes of how a layer is copied into whatever has been rendered before. There's a couple of presets that can be used here, and then the color operations on alpha and color will be set. But since we wanted to support modes similar to Photoshop, these default operations from the GPU were not sufficient. So that's why we introduced a new concept called blend modes. And here you will find, very commonly known blend modes that you would know from Photoshop or other editing packages. And I'd like to give you a quick example, since what I did when I tested it, I looked at a Photoshop tutorial and I just picked the same images and put it together, and I'll quickly load them and show you what was done. So I have these 3 images. I don't even recall what the site was, but at least I know how it should go together. So let me just make some space here, go to different locations. So put this image as a background. Okay, so it's small, zoom in. And now there's an interesting part here regarding the blend modes. Since the blend modes need to be able to filter against what has been rendered already. So this is a more technical thing, what goes on underneath the hood. Currently, the blend modes, we can show them only in the output, not in the canvas. This is a missing feature that we need to complete. But that I'll just move this output here right over to that one so that we see what's going on. And we'll have a look in the system view. So, and in the system view here, I have my surface, and which is basically my piece of paper where everything gets drawn on, and I can use this one as storage, and also for performance reasons, I can do a better processing, and we have access to all the textures. So I'll put a second one on top, and I think I was smart enough to label what I need to do here. So multiply by 8 on opacity at 0.8. So here I'll use the blend mode. Somewhere down here, it's one of the last ones. I simply type in the name again. It's faster anyway. So this is a multiply. And one thing that I found useful is that we are also a mix factor for the blend mode, so that we have a setting for that as well. Since this was missing in Photoshop, but I thought this might make sense, and you can even animate these values. And then we put the third one on top of it, and this should just be an overlay, and this will get the blend mode overlay. See what it is, overlay, and then the whole composition looks like that. And this can be, of course, done also to video, and this should give you enough freedom now to do and to cope with many different mix and blend modes. And but keep in mind, using these blend modes has a little cost, since there's additional rendering and texture lookup on the GPU. So the GPU, it's like reading another image or another video. It has to read the pixels that were drawn before, so on each stage. So when clip number 8, the background is rendered, it's fine. But the second one will read for every pixel it draws, it reads the background. The same applies to the top one. It reads whatever has been rendered before. So this has to be kept in mind. And as soon as you switch one of these clip containers in blend mode back to normal, this feature is turned off for that instance of a clip, and you reduce performance on that end. So if you encounter any performance bottlenecks, this might be a place to look at, or a way to reduce performance overhead.
Okay. In that case, I would do a little dive into something which has become very common, which is setting up, I would say, simple shows, which have to happen quite quickly. So let me just reset a few things. So we go back into our canvas. There we go. And I'm just going to reset our display surface quickly, so everything is back to where we started. There we go. So imagine we have a very simple show where I have a bunch of backgrounds, and I want to overlay these backgrounds, for example, with a camera input for one side, camera input for the other side, or two, and I want to fade in between all of these scenes, so to speak. And I want to program something that when I drag and drop a content onto one of these tracks, that it automatically takes the settings that I need. This is, I'll be honest, not the sexiest form of compositing, but it has become one of the workhorses of our industry, and we would like to show you how you can optimize such a workflow in Vertex. So I'm going to jump out of all of these elements and go to what I've called a template sequence. In Vertex, you can use clips. For example, I'll use here pip left, and I can give this image or give this clip a dimension. I can position it somewhere. I'll just do it for a new element, put it here, and I'm just gonna, I'll switch it into the standard mode. There we go. And I'm just gonna flip it by 90 degrees, and I'm gonna make it a bit smaller. There we go. And now I can create a template from this. So I can reuse what I've done here everywhere I want to. I'll go into here, press temp to get my templates. And here you can see template name. I'll now type in Martin's test, press enter, and you can see it's also changed the name to Martin's test. That's all I have to do. Now I can jump out of my template sequence, and let me just jump into my overlay sequence.
One thing is important, you turned off the playback.
Oh yeah.
So you don't want it to render anymore. So it just becomes your storage of templates, and that they don't get rendered at the same time. Really,
you can imagine it as pulling the plug. Nothing which happens in this sequence will affect my show anymore. Then I'll jump into my overlays. And now, once I click on one of these tracks, you can see there's a little drag and drop field called template clip. And now, if I go to my clip list, I will find my Martin test again, and I can drag and drop it into here. There we go. And now it says that this track has the template clip Martin test. So let's see if I did everything right. I'll grab a test pattern, drop it onto this element, and I can already see, aha, it has a little icon saying that this has received a template. Jump onto it, and there we go. It's vertical. If I now go back into my template clip, and for example, my show director comes along and says, I don't like it that way. I want to have it at, let's say, something like this. Okay, I'll adjust my template, leave my sequence again, or turn my sequence off again, go back into my overlays, and presto, it's taken the same value from that template. And that is, for example, what we've done here. We've added the template pip left to this track, template pip right to this track. So whatever I drag and drop onto this track will automatically take that template. Insanely fast way to do this. Something we will not cover in depth in this webinar, but we will supply in the sample project with the recording of this webinar. We've built a small little control view here, which, for example, shows you how you can, let's say, fade in or fade out these elements, and how I can, for example, press the button pip left and have it fade to the pip left or fade to the pip right.
It's actually a new feature that was recently introduced, so that the fade to cue and fade to time features, so that in the middle of the show, you can fade to any point in time or in cue and do a full crossfade. So if you suddenly need to change direction or jump somewhere else, you don't have to do a hard cut. And this will allow you to do a fade with a preload time, since you might not know where you're jumping to, and whatever content is there might need some time to be loaded. So you can even enter some preload time and your target time and the fade time.
And yeah, so this will be in the sample project. We unfortunately don't have time to dive in today, but for the people who have maybe used scripting a bit, watch one of the tutorials, and yeah, you can find out how to use it here. Because next to this simple setup here, something we see quite a lot is that people build a sequence like this. Let's say this is Jan's beautiful sequence, and I'm building a sequence.
Not the prettiest one.
Come on. I'd give you an Emmy for it.
Yeah, so, sure.
Let's call this one Jan, and I'll build something as beautiful. I'll call this sequence Martin. So let's imagine we're on an installation. We have two walls or two surfaces which we are working with. I'm programming one surface, Jan is programming the other surface. So this is my beautiful composition, couldn't be any better. There we go. This is what the world wants to see. And now we want to have a master show controlling this. So we have one show timeline which controls Jan's and my sequence. then we have two ways of how we can do this. And we would like to show these to you because these are extremely important to differentiate because they are used for different things. I dive into the first case, which is simply playing back things in sync. So I'm going to go here, create a timeline, a sequence which I call show, have it down here. And for the fun of it, I'm just going to open a few more playback editors and another one, stack them on top of each other. 1, 2, and 3. There we go. I'll open Jan up here. I'll open Martin here and my show down here. So what I want to have, if I move this timeline, I want these to move exactly in the same way. The way to solve that is you go into our playback mixing engines. The mixing engine is maybe familiar to you if you're used to video switchers or things like that. Inside of these, we have playback. So you can see I have playback Jan, I have playback Martin. I'll drag Jan into here, I'll drag Martin into here. And now, if I move this timeline, I'm moving this one up here exactly in the same way. Nothing is being rendered another time. I'm simply moving through my timeline and displaying it exactly in the same way as it was programmed.
So you're using your timeline number 6 as master control timeline that controls other timelines.
Exactly. But I can't do, if I want to, for example, add a color effect to everything which is happening in timeline Jan, I can't do that. I'm simply remote controlling this timeline. And what Jan would now show you is a way how you can actually use, as we mentioned before, use the rendered element, the rendered composition here, and keep on working with it. So that's another way of working. I'll reset the view quickly, and then you can dive in.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about nesting. So you basically just created clip containers for an entire playback. So this is of course important to show. This clip container has no content. This clip container controls a playback. That's important to notice. And since timelines can contain clip containers that control other things like DMX devices or surfaces, and not only clip containers. That's an important point. And what I will do is I'll go back one step back, or I want to do some more composition, and I'll create a new master composition sequence. I could use the same one here, but just for the for better overview, I'll just use this one and call this, for example, master comp.
If you like to rename things, F2 will give you a rename everything you click on. So if you click on something in the Project Explorer, press F2, you can rename it straight away.
And what I'm doing now, I'm not taking the playback that Martin did from the PME. I'm taking the sequence, Jan, and I drag and drop it down here. And it created a new content type. If we go back to content, now suddenly we have a new content that has this layering, the symbol for nesting. So this is a sequence. So this is a nested sequence from the sequence, Jan. And if I go in here, at some point, we will see whatever content was set up in that sequence. And this is now pre-rendering the entire sequence onto a texture. So if I zoom out a little bit, here you can see that the entire sequence is now rendered onto an HD surface. I can do the same thing to the other sequence of Martin, whatever he has been up to. I don't know what he programmed. So let's see what's happening.
Something beautiful.
Sure. And now I can composite these two together. So keep in mind when doing nested compositions, we haven't put any limit to how many depth of nested compositions you can do, but this also comes with a price in terms of CPU and GPU performance, of course, since all these images need to pre-render it live onto an intermediate texture and will then be played back. So there's an additional rendering step in between that is being added when doing nested compositions. So if you have I don't know, an 8 times HD output system and you have lots of content going on and you want to do a lot of nesting, this might push your GPU to its limits. So this is something to bear in mind. Or maybe you need one of the latest and greatest GPUs out there that cost a fortune, or maybe not available at the moment. Due to
both probably.
Yes, but in general, doing this kind of nesting and pre-rendering is possible in Vertex. But again, think of it, you use it wisely and where it needs to be. If you exaggerate it, you might be seeing your GPU indicator going through the roof at some point. This is possible. I don't say it happens all the time. I just send out the warning message here.
To give you some guidelines when to use which, if you want to play things in sync just at the same time, just merely pushing them forward, use the playbacks. If you want to really go ahead, for example, take Jan's sequence here and give it a color correction or even add a mask to it, then you should use the nested sequence workflow. What's very important to keep in mind, this nested sequence has a texture size. So if I go into settings, I have a plain size here. Or am I in the wrong
Wait
place?
a second. No, it's in content. Should be here. That's texture size.
Yeah, this is very important. So if you've built yourself a 4K sequence, you have to, even if you want to reuse it in 4K, you have to adjust this setting here. So this is really the size of the texture that is being rendered. And as Jan mentioned, the larger it is, the more GPU RAM it will need.
Another thing to mention, once I dropped in a nested sequence, it also has its own viewpoint. So in here, I have my own viewpoint that I can animate and look through. So this is the viewpoint at the content in that timeline.
Okay. So last but not least, before we get into a few questions, we've looked at videos, we've looked at images. Something we see happening more and more, and we don't want to leave out, is working with web browsers. So Vertex is fully capable of handling web browsers. So I can go ahead. This is our funny little showcase website where you can see beautiful projects. I could even go ahead, go here to interact and click on things in this web browser. I could do this in the full screen browser as well. So that's fairly straightforward, integrating websites. But what you can also do, if you have websites which have a transparent background, this background will be maintained in Vertex. And we see a lot of compositing happening where you, for example, have a very, very high-end background video, and then you have some overlays. So for example, we have a museum where there's some beautiful colors of beer on a large multi-screen wall. And across this beer, there's different bubble animations which are generated in real time. And the way they are done, they are generated in an HTML5 site, and the HTML5 browser is overlaid over the content, and the bubbles are, I think, multiplied on top. So you have a combination of a web browser with high-end video playback. And that is something we are seeing happening more and more, where people want the flexibility of a web-based tool combined with a high-quality playback, which only a video playback system using HAP, not just your ProRes, can give you. So that's
one question here. One question is, how do you do compositing with a playlist? And that's actually a good one. We've been talking about sequences for the past hour, and we didn't forget about playlists. Just another way of looking at tracks and clip containers. Maybe we should quickly cover what that means, since there's a couple of interesting and nice features in the playlist as well.
So in that case, I'll do a little beginning. So the playlist is, let's call it QLab on steroids. You can go ahead, drag and drop content into your playlist. You could grab things and rearrange them to put them in a different order, and you can press play. So far, so good. But the beauty is that in a playlist, you have different modes of how this works. So you could say you want to have a follow track. So this will automatically start when the last one is finished. You have crossfades, which you have in here, everything you would expect from a playlist. But I can now go ahead, click on my playlist, go to settings.
One step too far. Let me
then off you go.
One more thing before we, since that's a nice one, but one important thing, just from a structural point of view of Vertex. We looked at sequences for a long time, and sequences consist of tracks with clip containers, and the same structure exists in playlists as well, since every queue we call them queues or tracks in a playlist, also has a clip container. That's why there's this clip count over here and also clip name. By default, a normal playlist just has one clip per queue. And that's why the default mode is single clip. And if you want to edit your clip container's position, you can double click on a track and then you access its clip container. And here I can do my positioning, my scaling. So all of that you know from the sequence is available here. And what Martin wanted to show, that's why I had to break you real quick, is yeah, when you switch the mode from single clip to multi-clip, in case you want to have multiple contents on the same track, then you can yeah, basically switch the mode of the playlist to multi-clip. And when you drag and drop another item onto a track, now we have two elements in this one queue or track. And the reasoning I'm always mentioning tracks and clip containers can be copied and pasted from sequences to playlists and vice versa. So we had projects where clients have prepared the playlist tracks in a sequence and copied them over into a playlist.
So you can simply go ahead, press Control-C, go into your sequence, press Control-V, and there we go. There's my element from my playlist. So completely interchangeable. And yeah, you have sometimes the sequence is the better way of working because you want to have something which runs in a linear fashion per default and then maybe use fade queue to jump around. Or you want to maybe have something which I'm just going to be pressing next automatically all the time. And you don't want to go through all the work of arranging clip containers and overlapping them, then it's, yeah, really, as Jan showed, as simple as grabbing, dragging, dropping, and yeah, I could go ahead, select all of these at the same time, tell them to do a follow mode, and now one after the other after 10 seconds, yeah, would fade through. So a very classic thing we are all used to, but many media servers, for some reason, never actually integrate.
I also see another question. Do we support watch folders? Yes, we do. We haven't showed watch folders yet. The watch folders can be found under the Create section. Here are our watch folders. So watch folders can be used for 3 different things. That's why at the moment, and we might add more watch folder types. The standard one is just an import content. So you just watch a directory and will import the content it finds. And when it gets changed, we'll add it to the project. But we have also added watch folders that will update and create a sequence or playlist. And these watch folders have been added to automate the injection of content by end clients. For example, we had projects where projects where end clients just have a directory where they're on a regular basis exchange the content, and based on the content, a playlist is generated with templates. Yeah, this is that's what the watch folders are there for. And I'll just make one just to show a few of the features, and I guess you just have to try them out. And for example, this is a watch folder that will called that is of type update playlist. You can first of all reference a playlist here, which one should be updated. You can give it a couple of parameters and also put in a template clip name here. And there's also the directory, of course, that you want to set, that you want to monitor, and also set an interval of how frequent you want to monitor it and watch for updates. And there's also scripts before the change and after the change has been completed. So there's many options there to play with watch folders and automate the content injection from people who don't even touch the Vertex interface.
I see one more fun question, which I love. How do we get the colors into the layers? So sometimes little things that make life easier. If I click on any element, I'll click on this track for the moment. Up here, we see we have a color, which I can now simply adjust, and I can also give it a name. So that's fairly straightforward. I could do the same thing if I grab a clip container, click on it here, go to the user properties, and now here I also have a user color, which I'll bring up the alpha channel. So I can also give an individual clip container a color as well. So you can use colors everywhere in Vertex where you like. And yeah, for example, here, also type in a label.
Yeah. One user request from another webinar was the canvas target. When we change the color here, can it update as well? The answer is yes, it can. We added that feature after that webinar because it was so natural just to add it there. And these user colors are also reflected in the Project Explorer, wherever you have the tiles.
Then an excellent question. Can different users program different sequences at the same time? Absolutely, yes. That was the fundamental mantra we had, so to speak, when we started our work on Vertex. Everything has to be session-based, meaning every system which is connected into a session can, for example, play back video or be used for editing. So any amount of people can work on the same project at the same time. And it forces people to talk because, for example, if I'm moving this clip container to the right and Jan's going to be pulling it to the left, the last one who pulls is going to win. So it's absolutely real time on every system, no pushing, no committing. If I do this, it's done everywhere in the session. So it's a very good idea also to have different people work on different sequences so you don't get into each other's way. Or what we see a lot that clients have operators, for example, doing warping and blending, operators doing content import and sorting, and operators programming timelines. So everything can be done at the same time in real time.
Yeah.
And can even be done in a preview context. So you can switch, for example, this playback into preview, switch this editor into preview, and now I can work on this timeline in a preview mode, see what I'm doing without affecting my live output. So
let me bring up the live output so that we see both worlds. So this one is running live, and maybe we could add another PV.
No, I'll just go here, switch it to live, and go
to a different place.
Then I go back into my preview, and now I can work on this guy back here. I can edit it in any way I like, and move it around, do whatever I want, without affecting my live output in any way.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further questions? Looks. Oh, we're already over time a bit anyway. So maybe to close off, you can download Vertex for free on iversal.com/get-trial, or just on iversal.com, free download. Click on the top, and you will get absolutely the same version as a licensed product would be, with the only limitation that you have a watermark, which is displayed in the full screen renderer. And then you can try things, watch our tutorials on YouTube, try around. If you get stuck or somehow need some help, go to the help menu, go to send ticket, type in your email address, tell us what your issue is or what you're stuck with, press send, and then this is automatically linked to our support system. And then one of our support staff will be in contact with you to help you out or solve your problem. So the support is really fully integrated into the software. If you ever need it, just feel free to drop us a message on that system. Okay, we'll be announced.
Yeah, up to you.
We'll be announcing the webinars for February shortly. And as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out at sales@iversal or Martin@iversal or Jan @iversal at any time. And we'll be very happy to be in contact.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we're looking forward to more feedback and more input, and to see each other again on trade shows and in real life again. That would be great.
So in that case, take care. Look forward to seeing you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.